I'm honored. This is my third time I've gotten to speak in front of this group, and I'm honored and feel privileged to be able to use my voice. But I'll tell you, in preparation for today, everything I'm talking about is so relevant in how I felt today. It's scary to show up and to speak our truth, isn't it? It's very scary to put ourselves out there and let ourselves be seen, as Michelle did so well. Tonight's conversation was inspired by a woman that I met last year. Her name is Janetta. She's a 30-year-old woman. She's a professional singer and actress. She wows crowds 40 hours a week on a stage professionally. She knows how to use her voice in scripted professional life, but she shared with me that she struggles how to use her voice in her unscripted life. Isn't it challenging to use our voices? We want to be heard. We want to be validated. We want to be known and loved. And that is one of our greatest needs, to be known and loved. And the way that we're known and loved is to use our voice, right? But to use our voice, it's scary. So how do we do that? Yes, so tonight we're going to have a conversation. People will say, oh, I can't wait to hear you speak. I may be speaking, but I really hope that we all can have a conversation together. I'm going to share a little bit of my story. You can't use your voice if you don't have a voice. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I found my voice, and then at the end we're going to really talk together about how and when to use your voice. I'm not an expert in how and when to use your voice, but I've learned a lot through my experiences, and I hope that you will take something new away tonight. So here's how it's going to roll. I'm going to talk just real briefly about some messages I got as a child and as a young woman about using my voice. Then I'm going to open it up to you to share what messages you got and who the influences were in your life about using your voice, speaking your truth. Okay, so be thinking about what messages you got. So some messages I got were, don't talk back. Who heard that one?
Oh, yeah.
If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. Okay, so we're in agreement. We got some similar messages. Let's see. I heard don't think before you speak. Did you know what the think word, the acronym meant? Think, is it true? H, is it honest? I, is it important? N, is it necessary? K, is it kind? I mean, why would anybody speak if you had to go through that first? No? Why would anybody speak out? Yeah. I mean, how would I use my voice in that way if I had to think through all that? I grew up in a very religious home. I shouldn't say very religious. I grew up in a Mennonite home. That was the denomination that I grew up in. Maybe your mind went to Amish. We are in that continuum. The Amish actually left the Mennonites way back in the day. So you have very conservative very conservative Amish from Ohio or Lancaster, and then all the way over here is my progressive Mennonite church here in Percy. All right, so Percy Mennonite accepts gays, lesbians, LGBTQ community, has women pastors. Everybody's welcome at the table. Over here, you might be shunned if you don't believe and say the same, what your family believes. My home congregation was probably in the middle. So that gives you an idea of maybe where I, came up through. Didn't see a lot of women in leadership. Didn't hear a lot about assertiveness, communication. We were more passive. Amish Mennonites are known as the quiet in the land. We go about family, farm, faith. We don't get real involved with civic duty. When I was campaigning with Karen, that was a new thing for a Mennonite girl. That was a big deal. Never did that before. So that was exciting for me. Going to the Women's March this year and saying, you know what, my daughter wanted to go. And I said, yes, I want to be there with her. And I'm going to go, and I'm going to use my voice in that way. So grew up in a religious home. Scripture, one scripture that I internalized, I was a very sensitive child, was quick to listen, slow to speak. Okay, so we have to listen and then speak. What else? Show an interest in others. So those are good skills for me as a coach, right? I can show interest, I can listen. Those all honed some skills for me down the road that helped. But as a child, it left me a little voiceless. I became a compliant, people-pleasing child. My older sister was pretty outspoken, and my older brother. So, I heard a lot of conflict with my parents, so I became that. I didn't like that. I was very sensitive to that. So I had to just find my way there. Like I was said, didn't see a lot of positive role models. Women sucked it up. Women, divorce was scandalized. It was a scandal if there was divorce, and just women ran the household, but men were the head of the household. So that's kind of, as a young woman, I just went along with that. There was a 9th grade teacher that was very encouraging to me to start journaling. I call it a soul book, because when we use our voice, we're actually making our soul visible, right? Our souls become visible when we use our voice. So the soul book, the journal, became a place where my soul could become visible. I could actually, question things and figure out things. So that was a really safe place for me. And then the other safe place for me to use my voice, which was okay to use my voice, was on the athletic field, basketball court. I could encourage, and I could shout, and I could yell, and I could give instructions, and I soon found that my voice had a difference in my team's success, and it all just seemed to contribute to the good of the team. And so that was a really good place for me. And I'll end with high school by just saying a point for Trina, because I stood up, and it was kind of expected that I was going to take my athletic skills and abilities to the Mennonite college. I went to Mennonite grade school and high school, and I was just going to go on to use my gifts in a Mennonite university. Well, I decided that I was going to go to Ursinus College and break out of the fold and do something that I wanted to do, and to try this new way of being and be more free. So that was a good ending there. And so I'm going to break for right now, and I'm just going to ask you all, what messages did you get about using your voice and speaking your truth growing up as a young girl? Or maybe who influenced you? I talked about this English teacher that influenced me, or maybe there's some safe places that you felt comfortable using your voice. So it's all free game here. It's just kind of general feelings about childhood, young woman. What messages did you get? Stephanie.
And couldn't afford to go to college, so right out of high school, because they trained you, the pay was pretty good, you had benefits, what more could you want? So, I was at the bank, and we had a woman manager, and she was a spinster lady, the sweater around the shoulder, the little chain, and the glasses. Yeah, and she was talking about, I said, well, I'm not going to do this forever, but I got to see what's, going on, etc. And she said, well, one day you could be lead teller. And I thought, I'm really aiming a little higher than that. But she was so serious. I could be lead teller. Wow. I did turn out to be lead teller one day, but that's another story. But
so other people's ideas for you.
Yeah, it was, that's what you did. You weren't supposed to go any further.
Went to charm school and went to secretarial school so that you could get a man, right? So that was the message, like you just are going to get a man, and then that man left her when I was 13, and so I was raised as, be strong yourself, be an independent woman yourself, because you don't need a man. But the negative part of that, so very empowered, but you also shut yourself off. Because you shut yourself off from love, as Brene Brown says, you shut yourself off because you build up those walls because you don't want to be vulnerable, but vulnerable is the ultimate connection. Right, so that's an interesting where, I was born in the 70s with that Fabergé commercial that I'm sure sold no perfume but lots of antidepressants. Where I can fry it up in a pan and make you never forget you're a man, and I can bring home the bacon and bring home the bacon and make you never forget you're a man, except no woman could possibly live up to that. So that is what I grew up with. Yeah, so the 70s.
Some of our parents, giving us something that they don't want us to fall into as a result of their choices. So.
There's so many other negative messages out there. My dad said when he was teaching me to drive, see that guy coming out on the side street? Yeah, I see him. He goes, he sees you're a woman, he's gonna try to get out in front of you. Step on it. Until I was in college and I said, I'm going to buy a motorcycle. He goes, oh no, you're not. You have to sort your way carefully.
Step
Figure
on
out
it.
who you are.
Yeah.
So are you willing to take risks and stand up for yourself and say, yeah, I am.
Like they say those things, I had to kind of throw all the puzzle pieces up in the air. You know, if you think of your life and what they've told you and the messages, to throw it all up in the air at some point and say, okay, what fits with me? Which was my growth area, you know, and using my voice. That's maybe their message, but what is truth for me? What do I believe?
My family was to speak up for others. So by having that message, and I don't remember them actually saying that, but that was what was needed to be done, to speak up for the marginalized and to talk to people. I mean, you know, I'm a white, middle class kind of person who didn't have too many things that were not working. You know, I wasn't the brightest student and school was hard and I wasn't great at anything in particular, but I had a lot going for me, and I think a lot of the things that I experienced in my life were because of who I am and where I was born and what I look like. And so I think that was really the message at home, and so it sort of just surpassed, you know, yeah, of course you're going to talk to yourself for yourself because you've got to talk for other people who aren't heard.
I had been home for about 2 years out of the workplace. My husband was a full-time youth pastor over here at Blooming Glen Mennonite Church on Blooming Glen Road. And prenatal visit, going down through my throat and found a nodule. If you know anything about energy healing, throat and thyroid and voice, all are connected. So it really was a wake-up call for me to think about my health and start to begin to take care of myself. And so I was healing physically. When you're going into 2 surgeries and you're signing your name that there could be risks that you could lose your voice, you start thinking about your voice. And so I began to think about healing physically, but then also emotionally. What is it about this disease that, you know, I could maybe heal on a spiritual level, on an emotional level? And I started to think about, wow, maybe I have been shut down, and some of those messages that I got have been holding me back, as Michelle said. You know, what can I let go of here? And so that's kind of when I threw up the puzzle pieces and kind of said, yeah, what do I believe? What do I think? And one of the things that I chose to do was I went to a Jesuit center in Reading for 3 years. Not continuously, but I said, I want to do this. I want to go 1 weekend a month for 3 years to kind of have some space. I was a young mother and I needed some space. I wanted to grow spiritually, but I also just wanted some time. So I took that time, and it was a gift. It was a real gift. And if you've ever, you know, our culture is we're so busy and we don't really have a lot of time to sit and reflect. So it was in this time that I became aware of some choices that I had in my life, and which was really a time of huge growth for me. Excuse me, I've had a cold. It was a huge time for me. I started to experiment with art. That was kind of one way to begin to find my voice, to do that. Started to experiment with dress and different styles, and just trying to find that making my soul visible, trying to find that way. Thank you, Michelle. It was around this time that I thought it was important for me to be called Katrina. I don't know, Heidi, I think you introduced me as Katrina. I think I might have showed up at Sisters U as Katrina. Did I? Okay.
Yeah, still in my
I thought it was
phone.
important for me to kind of reclaim my given name, which I never really connected with because it felt so feminine, and I was this brute athlete, and you know, so I told family and friends, you know, call me Katrina. You know, that's what I want, and they did for a while. You know, I appreciated that they honored my voice in that way. But it was really the cancer diagnosis, I think, that helped me to find my voice. So fast forward about 6 years later, January 2006, I had I had this physical cancer, but there was another kind of cancer that was happening in my life, and it was a cancer of a different kind. It was a slow-growing tumor in my marriage. It was my husband's addiction, and it was really sucking the life out of both of us. And it was in January of that year that I had found out that the addiction had kind of escalated. And when I became aware of it, I remember sitting there with him, and in a very, very deep place, and I think it was those 6 years of trying to find my voice, and some of you have been there and you've had to say this, but I asked him to leave. I said, you know what? Our souls need a little surgery. We need to figure this out. And it was really a loving thing to do, in a sense, because I loved him and I loved myself, to say that this wasn't okay. And if I hadn't felt like it came from a really deep place, I probably wouldn't have stuck with it, because there was consequences for speaking up, because my husband ended up losing his job as a result of it. We had 4 small children at the time. I had no idea what the next day was going to bring, but had I not found that voice from a very deep place to say those words, it would have, I probably would have reneged on that decision to make him leave. I used my voice again to invite him back in less than a year later, about 8 months later, and we've worked hard to work through the challenges of that, and have done a lot of healing. But it's using our voice. It's called changing the dance, right? I no longer was that agreeable, good wife sucking it up. It wasn't acceptable anymore as I started to find my voice and hear my voice. So it was really important for me to, have that space and that time to be away from him and to work on my own stuff. So how did I find my voice? I'll just run through a number of different things. I just still remember that was in January when I asked him to leave, and probably February. I remember calling up the yoga studio up there on 7th Street. Jess from across the street, was practicing yoga there under the owner. And I showed up for my first class, and I started to listen to my voice in a new way, right? Yoga, we listen to our breath, which is actually our first voice. When we take our first breath as a baby, our voice is heard. So I started to connect with my voice, got into Reiki. I know this was woo-woo for this Mennonite girl to be going to a Reiki lady, but she's healing me. She's putting her hands through the different chakras. She gets to my throat and she says, "Girl, do you have trouble expressing yourself?" I said, "Yes, I do." And this was even after my cancer and all the work that I had done. This is 6 years later, and she's still feeling blocked. And it was like, okay, what do I need to let go of? What do I need to allow to be spoken in my life? And so that was. That was, Louise Hay would say, thyroid problems are about, creatively expressing yourself, so I had to keep working at this creative expression of who I am and what I'm about. It's really hard I didn't mention, one poem that I internalized as a young girl was called How to Be Perfectly Miserable. Have you ever heard of it? It was in one of those damn devotional books. I only remember the 2 lines. I just gave the book away because I'm like, you know what, okay, do you want to know how to be perfectly miserable? This poem described it. First 2 lines. Think about yourself. And the second line was talk about yourself. So to talk about yourself would, you'd be perfectly miserable if you started talking about yourself. So, but I internalized all that, and I believed that everybody had the authority except me, right? We don't believe that we have the corner on our own truth. We don't believe it. I mean, I had to give up self-help books for a while because, we always believe that somebody knows more than we do. We have to give it up. Why don't I read my own journals and maybe out my self-help books, soul books? So I had to kind of own my truth, and a lot of professionals helped me, coaches, counselors, spiritual directors, Reiki masters, EFT practitioners, tapping, you name it. We do a lot to try to heal and to find our voice. Yoga, as I mentioned, and my kids. You mentioned your children as your teachers. Oh my gosh, I have these daughters that are speaking their minds and they're telling teachers they're not going down to the principal's office. I'm like,
I love it.
say that. wow, but what a gift for our kids to be showing us a different way. And maybe we just are rebounding from what we grew up with. But, you know, like I said, when my daughter wanted to go to that march, yes, I want to go with you. If you want to be there, I want to be there too. So again, our kids, and they don't have problems saying no like we did, you know, they don't. Yeah, so, and that was my goal for a while, to disappoint one person a day. Make them have a shitty day by my disappointment. Disappoint one person a day. It's a challenge. I mean, it's a good goal to have. So I tried to do that. And then I tried to, I was thinking about this today. I was trying to stay in my own business, right? Stay in my own business. It's none of my business what you think of me, right?
Right.
It's none of my freaking business what Michelle thinks of me, what I'm wearing, whatever. It's none of my business. Stay in my business. So I've had to learn that. To speak my truth, I just have to stay in my business. I've had to accept my worthiness, right? I'm worthy just because the divine gave me breath. That's all. I'm worthy just because of that. I don't need to hustle for it. I don't need to hustle for worthiness. I don't need to, figure out, ways on social media to make me feel more worthy. I'm worthy just because I have breath and because I'm alive and I'm existing. So I've had to accept my worthiness. And my worthiness is not on the line tonight, whether I screw up or, it's nothing's at stake, right? Because I'm already worthy. So I've had to accept that. And then there's this other mantra that I really value and appreciate. It's from Brene Brown. She talks about choosing discomfort over resentment. When we speak our truth, we have to be okay with choosing a little discomfort. It's uncomfortable to share our truth or to confront somebody or to say how we feel or to express a need. But if we don't, what's the flip side? The flip side is we get resentful and we hold resentment in our bodies.
And resentments are linked with cancer.
And resentments are linked with cancer. Okay, so choosing discomfort over resentment. Choosing discomfort over resentment. That's another key phrase that's been helpful to me. Yes, so those are some of the ideas. I did take an online course on assertiveness. I will say that. I don't know what this means, but I became a certified assertiveness coach. But yeah. But I'm like, why don't they teach assertiveness in schools? Everything is communication. We use our voice from the minute our first breath to our dying breath is of our voice. Communication in the bedroom, on social media, and parenting, and work. So how and when do we use our voice? That's the next question. And before I get into what it looks like for me, what have you learned? This is an amazing group of women. You've taught me so much about being, using my voice and being empowered. What have you learned about, what phrases have helped you to speak your truth?
It's proven. What you tell yourself is what you believe. You have to teach your kids to say, I am beautiful, I am smart, I can do this, I can accomplish that. And then you have to do it yourself too. You have to do it to yourself. What you say to yourself, it will influence everything.
But if I have to regret things I've said as opposed to things I've kept silent about, I'd rather regret the things I've said.
Okay.
Entire life, and I was like, this is my TED Talk, and I'm talking to Penny wherever she is. She's like, no, it's my TED Talk. And I was like, 3 million, you can have the TED Talk. But what she taught me, I spent my whole life building up little bricks to protect myself from my youth and that I wouldn't be vulnerable. And what she said is, bravery, which is the word of the year, and we'll talk about that at Best Foot Forward, and courage. Courage comes from the Latin word cur, which means open-hearted. And that's what Sisters U has taught me, is to live my life open-hearted and to be vulnerable, because the only true connection that you and I can have, and that social media and the whole culture has taken us away from, is that connectivity. And I can only have a true connection with you if I'm vulnerable and you see me and I'm enough. And I had to learn that I'm enough, and that I also had to learn to ask for help.
Yes.
When I couldn't do it anymore.
Well, one of the speakers we had here said a phrase, and this has been rolling around in my mind ever since. Apologizing for my existence.
Yeah.
And I keep saying to myself, I gotta stop apologizing for my existence. You know? You know? But, I mean, that's, and yeah, it's, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, I'm sorry,
right.
yeah, I'm sorry, I'm taking up this room, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm looking at you. You know? For years, I wouldn't look people in the eye, because I figured they would think I was staring at them.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I still do it. I still look and then slide away. But apologizing for my existence, I mean, that, you know.
Anyone, Seth?
I think timing on using your voice is pretty key there too, because where my sister and I don't agree is she will right now, if she's really pissed off at you, will say absolutely everything that comes to her mind, and it's very hurtful. Where I will take a little bit and I'll get back to you. You know, let's talk about this, you know, and I think that we accomplish a little bit more that way than when she's saying things that she can't take back. Where, you know, like once you've said that, it's out there, you know, so I think timing, you know, like, yeah, say what you have to say, but you don't have to be mean and nasty about it.
That's right.
Especially with close family members that tend to really hurt me. And because I have to, like Karen, I have to go through it in my head, knowing full well that if I really speak my truth with that person, it won't get me anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So sometimes, just like you said, just thinking about it. And what I did the last time, first of all, I pray a lot. I pray, please give me a voice. Please. I had one serious family crisis where I was so afraid of speaking my truth, and my truth being really destructive because of the situation. So I actually imagined Martin Luther King to speak for me. I said, who had to be so brave that they had to walk into a war zone and still be peaceful? And it worked.
It worked.
It worked. I can't tell you what I said,
Oh, that's sweet.
but it does. Sometimes we communicate as much with the way we handle things, or what we do or do not say, and with the rules. I mean, I think I totally agree. Sometimes thinking things through. And in my childhood, I have to say, I didn't even know I was angry. Or I just knew I felt awful sometimes. Like even I had something like this with a friend this week, and I had to think through what happened, what took place that I felt the way I did, and I figured it out. And I'm not sure that talking about it is really going to fix that.
Listen to that deep voice. So, I knew I wouldn't want to end this conversation. I knew I'm missed. So what does it look like on a daily basis for me to use my voice? And I'm just going to say, you know, I just kind of shared some big moments of what helped me to find my voice. This would have felt nice, okay, being able to go back and say this would have felt nice, or this would have been helpful. This is what I prefer. I'm so bummed you can't be there. You know, being able to express to somebody. This may be very basic to some of you, but to me, some of these statements are a big deal. I can't believe you just said that, right? I don't see it that way. No, I can't do it. Yeah, and the list could go on. What are any statements that you use frequently? Thanks, no thanks?
That's not going to work for me.
That's not going to work for me. Kim?
I just read a great article that I can't think of his name, but the guy at the head of Amazon
Uh-huh.
just talked about with his business. He says he'll say to his staff, "I disagree, but I support you." So
Okay.
I don't have to go down that path.
Yes.
But as
Yes.
a team, I'm still going to be there for you.
Yes, perfect. So it's expressing the felt need, right? You said your needs weren't valid, but expressing that felt need. I don't have to be attached to whether this need is met. I just have to, for me, my growth area is to just express the need. Okay, ending with Brene Brown. She says, nothing more daring than showing up, putting ourselves out there, and letting ourselves be seen. Nothing more daring than showing up. Michelle showed up tonight. She put herself out there and she let herself be seen. And I will say that not everybody's earned the right for us to be seen, right? There's not some people in our lives that just aren't safe to be
That's right.
to show our souls to. So I just end with that, not as a cautionary thing, but I dare you to be brave, but also to be listening, right? That's the
Put yourself in harm's way.
to put yourself in harm's way. All right, thank you, ladies. Awesome.